On Sunday, there was FanFest at Citi Field. There were current players there, former players there. Towards the end, you did get Gary Cohen to interview big guys of the organization, Mendoza, Cohen, and Stearns, live in front of Mets fans. And you were hearing a lot of Pete Alonso chants, a lot of "We Want Pete" chants. They tried to temper the situation, but it continued throughout that entire discussion. Steve Cohen laid down the line and was very transparent with Mets fans. And I do want to get into these comments, but I think at this current moment, with how we're feeling, the truth hurts. I don't know what to tell you here. Talking about it after the Pete Alonso chants that he was getting from the crowd, he said, "This has been an exhausting conversation in negotiations. Soto was tough. This is worse. We have made a significant offer. I don't like the structures that are being presented back to us. I think it is highly asymmetric against us, and I feel strongly about it. I will never say no. There's always the possibility, but the reality is we're moving forward, and we're going to continue to bring in players. And as we continue to bring in players, the reality is that it's going to become harder to fit Pete into what is already a very expensive group of players that we already have. And that's where we are. I'm being brutally honest, like we are on Mets Weekly. Hey, shout out to us. I don't like the negotiations. I don't like what is being presented to us. Maybe that changes. Certainly, I'll always stay flexible. But if it stays this way, I think we will have to get used to the fact that we're going to have to go forward with the existing players that we have. Scott Boras, in response to that via the New York Times a few hours later, did talk about it, and he addressed it and said Pete's free agent contract structures requests are identical to standards and practices of other clubs who have signed similar situated qualifying offer / all-star level players. Nothing different. Just established fairness standards. Obviously, Scott Boras is going to respond to something as public as that, which, again, we can go into Scott Boras as much as we can. But from what we just heard from the owner, directly from him, you rarely see an owner be as transparent as he just was. And I have talked about this as my pet peeve many, many times with front offices. I'm sure people remember me saying this over and over and over again on this show. I don't like to be lied to. I wasn't lied to here. He told me straight up.
Yeah, and for a guy who's not top 50 in Major League Baseball, all this crap, I mean, for a guy who's not the guy. Here's the point. I think this is what he said, because there was let's say a minority of fans saying, well, eventually Steve Cohen's going to step in and play the fan card. Well, Steve Cohen pretty much said that shit's not happening. So that to those fans that were holding on, thinking, that have been negative on Stearns, being like, well, Cohen's going to step in and get the job done. He didn't. He's not going to do that. He has pretty much outright told you, I'm letting David do his job, and that's it. Like, I'm not stepping involved. And again, with the Soto thing, he got taken. Like, let's be honest, the Soto thing, he did get taken advantage. Almost $800 million. He's setting the example that that's not happening. Yes, for a generational talent, yeah, we'll like go to
Top
maybe
1%. Absolutely.
yeah. If I am I going to do a little more glazing when I have to? Yeah. So, and this is also kind of a get back to say, oh no, that's not happening every time, Scott. Like, you win. And then this is Cohen plus Stearns being like, yeah, we can be friends, but I'm not just going to be your, oh, here's my big cash cow. That's not happening. The Mets are setting their price, and Cohen is letting David do his job. Like, yeah, we talked Cohen, that was all mostly Soto. For other things, he's letting Stearns do his job. And if he's got a number that he thinks he's worth, they're not going under there, and you're not going to have that knight in shining armor that some Mets fans had of Cohen's going to do it. Cohen knows what the fans want, and he's going to see the fans being all pissed off that Pete Alonso. Yeah, guys, that's not happening. So, and the fact, again, it was so refreshing because we saw Bob Nutting. All these teams are having their fan fest this week, and the Cubs owner being like, well, I'm just trying to cut it profit. Like, you're seeing, this is like the only owner that's at one of these fan fests that's just outright just saying what needs to be said and honest, not like, well, we're going to do our best, and if it happens, it happens. Like, no, he's saying like, hey, I want to get it done. An offer's been made. It's the others, and also it puts some pressure on that other side, being like, hey, we've put an offer out. We're not doing that stupid Prince Fielder deal that you idiots want. That's not happening. We've put an offer. We're not bidding against yourselves. While also, hey, Pete, this isn't the 90s when Frank was in Prime's Frank life where there's not social media. Everybody knows everything. And it doesn't take an idiot to go onto a computer and say, man, there's really no interest, actual interest in Pete Alonso. So now it's to the point of maybe you're turning Pete Alonso heel a little bit, being like, the Mets are putting their offer. They put a decent offer. Pete, you don't want to come back? He doesn't give a shit about the orange and blue glasses, but like he's kind of not playing it like, oh, Pete doesn't care about his number in the rafters or breaking Darryl Strawberry's record. That means jack shit, but to some people it does.
Yeah.
They're making it pretty much proven to kind of get them, I'm not saying in the good graces, but kind of put some heat on Alonso, say, hey, we're doing it. We've offered. What other team? Like we maybe heard the Blue Jays have an offer, but it's not that good because he's not taking it. So to the point of we've put the best offer on the table and not taking it off the table because we don't want to use that as leverage against Toronto, and they're playing this right. So it was amazing how Cohen did it, and especially how he did it, where he could have made it, put his foot in the mouth to an extent if he would have done this improper, but he took it the best way he possibly could. And again, and it's kind of funny that at the beginning of that press conference, you got people booing him, chanting that we want Pete. And if I can quote Star Wars a little bit, by the end of it, like how he pretty much tells you Pete Alonso probably not here, and it got caused to thunderous applause by the end of it. And see, that's the problem. So again, fans are gonna be fans and want your jerseys and all that, but he's not gonna be that saving of, Cohen's gonna be big money. He's not. So and he's letting Stearns doing his job, and he did a good job.
Cannot agree more as to how they are really looking at this. And listen, I understand, the attachment. It makes sense, obviously. If you are a fan of this team, there is an emotional attachment here. I understand it. But again, you can't use the emotional attachment in that way to make these business type of decisions. Now, I'm just going to make an assumption here, and I'll bring it right to you, Frank. We are always brutally honest here. We say things straight up. We don't sugarcoat it. We don't tell you what you want to hear. We tell you what you need to hear or what we think you need to hear. At this current moment, and for those of you who are in denial about it, that's fine, because I understand, given the situation. Out of what I am hearing at the pace that this is going, Frank, I think Pete Alonso's gone. I think that's it. I don't think he's coming back now.
Yeah, and Cohen basically said the same thing you're saying. I mean, he basically said the words like, you know what, we're bringing in other people now, and, this is a group of already expensive players, and he's saying that something needs to change from the other side in the Boris and Alonso camp in order for a deal to get done. Because what he is saying is that what is being asked right now of us, we are not going to do. So the Mets have already said that we are not giving in to what they're asking for. So they need to come up with something else. And like we've said, and Andrew just made the point, like go on the computer and look it up. But until another team does that, well, why should the Mets give in to that offer that Boris wants? Because other teams have not given that. So why should the Mets? And that's been our point for a majority of this offseason is, don't bid against yourself, don't outbid yourself. Don't overpay when you don't necessarily have to. And you know what? The other teams that could potentially be interested are known for dumb overpays. So if that's what they're going to do, then do it. And they will continue to, unfortunately, not win World Series. The Angels are not going to win next year, and the Blue Jays are not going to win next year either, or the year after that. So, you know what? That's just the kind of situation that they're in. It's like, you know what? Stearns is running this team now. He has a playoff pedigree of being in the postseason every year. Mets were in the NLCS this year, and the Angels and Blue Jays, or whatever team gets Pete, if it's those two teams, they're not going to the championship series no matter what league they're in. So, you know what? They have shown you, like, this is just not how you build baseball teams. And I find it so interesting. Like, the thing that probably stood out the most to me is that Cohen said the negotiations are worse than the Soto negotiations. Because everybody could agree on this.
1 second, Frank.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How much did Juan Soto end up getting?
Oh, he got quite a bit. And here's the thing. This is the thing that's very interesting. So we got the 700.
Worse?
Yeah. He got 765 million and potentially 800 million depending on how things end up going. And it sounds like that's kind of what Boris wants to do again, where it's like if he opts out or if he doesn't opt out, then he gets more money. Like if they kind of hurt themselves a little bit by giving that to Soto, that and now Boris wants to use that excuse like, oh, it's just previous free agent negotiation tactics. It's nothing new. Well, it's like, listen, Pete Alonso, as much as he's done for this organization, for this franchise, a lot of people love him. He's not Juan Soto. He just isn't. I mean, you could look at a bunch of different numbers and it will tell you that. So he doesn't get the special contract that Juan Soto got. But one of the things that we said when Soto signed it was, this is a crazy deal when you think of all the different stipulations that are in there. And in order for a negotiation process, how do you come up with that result? When we were like, oh, and his family gets all this stuff, and if he opts out, if he doesn't opt out, he gets that. Like, there were just like so many different little things that would take a while negotiating in order to come up with that. So to then say that these Alonso negotiations are worse, that tells me that this must be a really, really crazy situation, because we all agreed that Juan Soto is an overpay. Like, it's a massive overpay.
Of course.
And we know it. And we know it. And Steve Cohen still did it. But he's saying, so even with him doing that, he's still saying that this Pete Alonso thing, I don't like it and I'm not going to do it. Like, that, what it tells me is that the offer they're asking for has to be so insane that for even Cohen to be like, no, there's something going on there. Because if it was just Stearns, I could see people being like, oh, it's just Stearns being cheap and small market mindset and this stuff. But when Cohen's the one saying no, something's up.
Yeah. No. I'll tell you how insane this is. Now, roughly, okay, this is just roughly, rough estimate, okay? When it comes to Stearns being cheap, okay, if the Mets were to end up giving him $30 million a year, which is probably what they're asking. I don't know if that's official, so who knows? If, let's say, they were to give Alonso $30 million a year, that would eventually put them in the third luxury tax threshold, which is about $77 million over the surcharge space, and then it's also plus $20 million, which is the starter point. That means that it would be 60% of that contract would be the including tax. $30 million a year. 60% of that is $18 million. $18 million plus $30 million a year, $48 million a year. Andrew, with nobody bidding against you, is Pete Alonso worth $48 million a year?
I don't think we have enough time for me to say how many more things are worth more, or that, no, not a shot in hell is Pete Alonso worth $48 million. And again, But Pete Alonso's going to hit 40 homers. We need a guy that hits 40 homers, right? So, I mean, it's $48 million. Steve Cohen's got all this money, so who cares?
Yeah. I did the calculation here of what a $30 million AAV would mean for Pete Alonso. Your payroll plus tax most likely will be like $480 million if they were to do that, around there. I mean, that is an insane number for a one-tool first baseman. And listen, we're not talking about this as Pete Alonso hate. This isn't hate. This is the reality of the situation. We're not slandering him. We know what he has done for this team. I'll tell you right now, from what we saw from Steve Cohen and David Stearns this weekend, like I said, I don't like to be lied to. I wasn't lied to. Even though David Stearns has not lied once in his entire tenure, as compared to other guys like Billy Epler or Zach Scott or other guys like that, where they try to sell you on a bill of goods. They didn't lie to you. They were transparent. They told you what has been going on. They probably shouldn't have done it, to be honest, because it's kind of a little bit of breach of the private negotiations. When it got that crazy, you had that elephant in the room. They addressed it. And what was really, really funny to me was Stearns talks about it, and I think Andrew mentioned this. Stearns talks about it, about, we love Pete. He has every right to go out there and look what is there for him on the market. But then he gets to, we have some young players and we have this and that. Completely gets booed. Cohen piggybacks on that, agrees with him. After that, yay! 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 Y Yay! away. Take my baby. Like, literally, it's insane. Cohen is apparently the Mets fan, right? He's the Mets fan, the longtime owner. He's the savior of the franchise. Stearns is the new guy in town, even though he got you to the Game 6 of the National League Championship Series when everybody said his team sucked. But whatever. Does it have to just come from Steve Cohen's mouth for people to just stop? And I'll tell you right now, after what I just heard, even though it probably is unprecedented, and it shouldn't have happened, and it shouldn't have gotten to this level, and how everybody is on the same page in this front office. Steve Cohen, David Stearns, they are the most stable I've ever seen the organization ever. I have never been, after that, I have never been more proud of a Mets front office in my life. Doesn't say much, I know, but I'll tell you right now, that transparency, that honesty, the brutal honesty, what more can you ask for? Whether it is what you want to hear or not.